There's a beautiful handout that our executive director, Kathy Rabinovich, created with Kathy Brewer and some other members of our team that you received on the way in. And that is now going to be the template for our Shabbat flyer. I know you will all dreadfully miss the risographed blue on white circa 1965 Shabbat flyer. But Kathy gave us, knowingly or not, a gift now, and it will also enable people who are visiting our congregation to learn a little bit more about us and a little bit more about our story and the story behind our stained glass windows. And that story started, as you would read in the beginning paragraph of the brochure, in a very, very brief conversation that Gail Baer and I had during a bar or bat mitzvah ceremony service a few years ago, when I just sort of was thinking out loud, as I tend to do, and it gets me into trouble, as it did. And not because I was talking during services, that's a very Jewish thing. For those of us who grew up in conservative and Orthodox synagogues, talking to your friends during services is the same as talking to God. It's totally kosher. In Reformed congregations, not so much, but where I grew up, yes. And I said, you know, it's strange that when they built the sanctuary, that they didn't decide to do the sort of traditional stained glass windows like we have in the chapel, the windows that bear the insignias of the different tribes. And we had an open conversation, not that there's anything wrong with the beautiful stones of the 12 tribes of Israel that were previously in the windows. They were lovely, and the ark door was a piece of art. It was really beautiful. But there seemed to be something that, as we approached our 20th year, we could have thought about doing. 20th year in this building, 100th year as a synagogue. And that started, for those of you who don't know, our president is persistent and strategic and skillful and knows how to get things done. And so, without saying much more, Gail agreed. We actually started our conversation with also looking at the Ner Tamid and wanting something a little bit different than what we had. And before you knew it, Evie and Sherm Bendelin were gracious enough after we went to Israel together to work with me and an artist in Jerusalem on the Torah covers, and we sort of went inside out, and before you know it, everything else was here. So to get us started tonight, I asked our president, who was then, I believe, the secretary of the board, to say a few words about our project, about our vision, about tonight, and then I'll share a few words about what it means to rededicate a sacred space. If you think about it in the span of Congregation Beth Israel's history, I'm sure other rabbis, greater rabbis, have stood on this bima and the bimot of two other campuses and dedicated and rededicated yet again sanctuaries and bimas and holy places. So I am not, let's put it this way, I am humble enough to know I'm not the first one to preside over such an occasion, nor will I be the last. And so it's a great pleasure to begin our evening in giving our thanks for this beautiful space and time to call upon Gail Baer. Shabbat Shalom.
God's most precious gift to us as Jews is the Torah. And the gift of Torah goes far beyond the physical scrolls. The Torah impacts how we act, what we say, how we live, our relationships with each other, and our personal relationship to God. The Torah serves as our moral compass, our foundation, and our guidepost to everything we do, including what's happening here tonight. Tonight, we are rededicating our sanctuary, the centerpiece of our shul. And most importantly, so that you know, our community has done exactly what God commanded us to do in the Torah. This is from Parshat Terumah in Exodus. Let them make me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among them. V'yasu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. Those words are few, but powerful. We are instructed to build this place, not for God, but dwelling with God, so that we can experience God's holiness together as a family and with each other as a community. That text, "Let them make me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among them," encourages us to find holiness in two ways, both of which I think speak to the heart of the Beth Israel family. The first way we can find holiness is through a place, and this is our place. This is our home. It's our warm, dynamic synagogue where we gather, where we meet, where we eat, where we pray, where we cry, we sing, and we laugh a lot. The second way we can find holiness is through each other, through our relationships, our connections to each other, to our old friends, our new friends, our teachers, and our rabbis. Our relationships allow us to learn about life, each other's lives. We find God's holiness in our actions with and for each other, making sure that God dwells within us in how we live and act. So this holiness that I just described, this holiness in place and this holiness in relationships, it all includes a piece of us. And as Jews, we are so fortunate to be in a constant cycle, a system of giving and receiving all of these gifts. And all of this unites us all in living Torah in a place with each other, which brings us to this day. When the Sanctuary Committee began this process about 2.5 years ago, we had a blank piece of paper, and it was pretty scary. And I don't know how many of you have participated in consensus building with Jews and art, but it is really challenging work, hard work. And our active discussions were not only about what we wanted the windows to look like, or the Holocaust Memorial, or the Ner Tamid, the Aron HaKodesh, but we talked about what we wanted it to feel like, what we wanted that sense of being to feel when we stepped into this place. It was also critical to us that we address the very costly but very sacred task of repairing all of our Torah scrolls. So when the design was finally complete, our committee presented the proposal to the board of directors. They approved the project wisely with one condition, and that condition was that nothing could commence at all until the project's cost to complete was fully funded. So we asked you for your support, and thank you to all those families that truly gave of your hearts to make this happen. Your gifts are a testament of gifts that will keep giving for many future generations. Giving to this project and working on it was indeed a sacred task, and when I, like many of you, saw this completion for the first time in real life, not on paper, not on a screen, not a picture on a phone, it literally took my breath away. And when the ark doors opened for the first time, I was simply a faucet. So I feel like we can now officially note our first milestone in what I hope are many celebrations of our centennial, marking our first 100 years and moving into our second century. And I'm confident that the founders of this great community are looking down and beaming with joy tonight. Let them make me a sanctuary so that I may dwell among them. Ve'asu li mikdash v'shachanti b'tocham. May we continue to dwell together with each other and with God in this full of love place for generations to come, and may this sanctuary anchor and fulfill the beautiful souls of our Congregation Beth Israel family. Shabbat Shalom.
For the second time this week, I am finding it very difficult to follow Gail Baer, who spoke equally as beautifully at our annual meeting on Wednesday night. and has done so again today and did so last Rosh Hashanah. It's getting more and more challenging to follow Gail. There are just two short anecdotes and then a little bit of Torah. The first anecdote was the conversation that I had at Chompy's with Ron and Diana Leeds when I asked them if they would be kind enough to provide the funding for the Ner Tamid. Ron could, and they're here tonight, Ron could care less what the Ner Tamid itself looked like. He knew exactly, and Ron and Diana both knew, that the Ner Tamid is the focal point outside of the Torah itself. The Torah represents the Word of God and the will of God and God's desire for us, but the Ner Tamid represents the presence of God. And so what it looked like wasn't important, but he had one caveat, which was, and Diana agreed as well, that the Ner Tamid had to have the word chai on it. And so when I presented him the first picture, he basically said, that's fine, beautiful, gorgeous. It's missing something. It's missing the word chai. And the confluence of the word and will of God for us in the Torah, the presence of God for us in the Ner Tamid, and then us, chai, life. That confluence, that synergy, it's as if that very first conversation that I had, very first solicitation that I had, set the tone for the rest of the project. Which leads to the second anecdote. I'm here almost 13 years, and when I tell you that of all of the donations, of all of the things, of all of the parts, we have one thing maybe left, I don't think, for the first time in my many years of service, I didn't have to ask anyone for anything. Yes, I had conversations with people, but I have to say it was pure tzedakah from the heart for everyone. Gail and I didn't have to explain anything. It was as if the idea and the concept spoke for itself. It was the first time in my career that someone actually, more than someone, many people called me and asked to give. And that was incredible. It's a testament to this congregation, but it's a testament to the verse that Gail read. God asked before that verse for the Israelites to bring gifts of their hearts. To do it without having to be asked is pure tzedakah. The third anecdote is about a gentleman named Ed Burt. Edward Burt was hawking me a chinik for months and months and months, was more persistent than even Gail was in telling me that it was a shanda that we didn't have a proper memorial for the Holocaust in our sanctuary. Months and months and months. Rabbi, when are we going to have something at the front of the sanctuary for people to look at so that when you say before Kaddish, we remember the 6 million who perished in the Shoah, they have something to look at. Little did I know that when we finally green-lighted this, that Ed had another idea, which was to use the verse that we used. Tell your children about it, and let your children tell theirs and their children the next generation. Rabbi, he said, find the verse, it's from the book of Joel, and put it on there. Make sure it's on there. And so, in loving memory of Ed Burt, we have not one, but 2 Holocaust memorials affixed to the front of the congregation so that when we say the words before Kaddish, that we recall with love the 6 million who perished in the Shoah, including the 1.5 million children who have no one to say Kaddish for them, that we remember the words of the book of Joel, because Ed of blessed memory knew, and he was right, that if we don't tell our children so that they'll tell their children, those who died in the Holocaust will have died in vain, and that is not acceptable. These 3 small anecdotes, brief anecdotes, tell us something about our people. tell us something about that very first capital campaign 3,250 years ago in the wilderness of Sinai, when the Israelites were told that those whose heart so moved them shall build for me a sanctuary so that I may dwell with them. What it tells us is that Jewish life is centered, always has been and always will be, in the Beit Knesset, in the synagogue. The center of the Jewish people's heart is in the Aron HaKodesh, is in the Torah. And so tonight, as we rededicate this sanctuary, and as we also read on this Shabbat Kedoshim, the Holiness Code, which tells us about ethical behavior, and when we fuse together the concept of ritual of Jewish prayer and worship in the synagogue, the Jewish heart beating in the synagogue, and think about it, none of that matters unless we're out there in the world acting ethically, being holy, we find the essence of our synagogue and of Congregation Beth Israel. These three anecdotes, fused with Kedoshim and the verses that Gail shared with us, and our 96th confirmation tomorrow morning, and all those who are here present with us and those who are watching online, that tells us what it means to be a community, what it means to be a congregation. Whether we as individuals participated in this particular campaign or not isn't important. What's important is that we bring our hearts to it. And so I would share with you 3 final words. You can stay seated for a second. We originally had a list of 5 ideas for the inside of the ark. 5 ideas, 5 lines that we overthought, as is our custom. And we decided ultimately that while we can see the Torah through the ark doors, the new ark doors, that we would ultimately write the words that we think best represent our aspirations as a community. Knowing that people were part of the process, that these ideas came from congregants like Ron and Diana Leeds, like Ed and Sandra Burt, and like the members of the committee. These were not top-down decisions. Rabbi Keller and I had very little, of course, to do with the art itself, but very little to do with this project. It was you. It was you. That Ner Tamid would not have the word Chai in it if it wasn't for the Leeds, and we would not have had Holocaust memorial plaques if it wasn't for the Burts. And we would not have had this if it wasn't for everybody who participated. Chesed, Ahava, and Chesed. Chesed, Ahava, and Emet. These are the words that we want as our lifelong ambition and aspiration as a community. Kedoshim, the Torah portion for this week, tells us to be holy because God is holy, but it also knows that each one of us is imperfect, each one of us is broken, each one of us brings our own faults into the synagogue every time we walk in this room. All of us do, but we come here to make ourselves better because we aspire to be closer to God and each other. And so on this night, as we rededicate the sanctuary, we want to remind our congregants and our guests and our visitors that ours is the task of aspirational Judaism. We aspire to truth, to transparency, to sharing information, to knowing right from wrong and being able to distinguish between the two. We will not ever, ever knowingly or purposefully speak untruths from this bima, ever. Ahava, love, is about our relationships with each other, not love in the abstract, but love through connection. Love through what it means and feels like to hear the voices of our children sing. Love to know what it feels like to be sitting with our close ones, our dear ones, our family and friends on Shabbatot and holidays. And love that Rabbi Keller and I very much hope, love for Judaism, that comes from this bima, we hope, every Shabbat and holiday. And chesed is compassion. That is the act of doing what it is that we need to do to take our very, very broken world and make it better. And so tonight, we join together in rededicating this holy space, to thinking about the stories that came together in bringing this tapestry that is in front of us together, and in knowing that we will always aspire to truth and to love and to compassion from this bima, so that all of you, all of us, can take its message from this holy space out into the world as our people have done for over 4,000 years. And so it's my pleasure to call upon and acknowledge all of our donors. We are going to be giving everyone these beautiful plaques that were put together by our executive director, Kehilah Kedoshah. And so that you know, there are special plaques for the individual gifts, pictures of the that were lovingly provided for us by Peter and Alyssa Cohen, who are members of the congregation and professional photographers. And every one of these will say on the bottom, transforming our sanctuary for the 2nd century, emet, ahava, chesed, truth, love, kindness, with deepest gratitude to our donors for invigorating the Goldsmith Sanctuary through your donation of a stained glass window or ner tamid or whatever it is that's listed on there. May 13th, 2016, the 6th of ER 5776. And so we're going to call everyone up here who participated. They will be able to take these on their way back to their seats and ask them to join us in the sacred task of rededicating Congregation Beth Israel's Goldsmith Sanctuary. And so we'd like to call for this honor to join with me and Rabbi Keller on the bima as we stand in front of the Aron HaKodesh. Those who are here with us, there are some who are not. Cindy Lubin and David Lorish, who were generous enough to enable us to repair all of our Sifrei Torah. Diana and Ron Leeds, who were, as I mentioned, generous enough to provide us with our new Ner Tamid. Suzanne and Steve Hilton and Andrea and Dr. Andrew Svetley, who were so generous and kind to donate our Holocaust memorial plaques for this sanctuary and for the Roth Family Chapel. Michael Baer and Gail Baer, Terry and Alan Bandler, Linda and Steve Bandler, Eve and Steve Bressler, Jackie and Lance Cohen, Julie and Dr. Steve Heimovich, Michelle Sobel Lerner and Dr. Eric Lerner, Melissa and David Monheit, and Leslie and Brian Ziff, all of whom were generous and kind enough to donate stained glass windows. Everyone else in the congregation at this time, we would ask you to please stand for our rededication.